So good to see you today.
It's great to see you, Lori. It's always wonderful to see you.
So what are we talking about today, Jonathan?
I think we're talking about empathy. It's something that's been around us and something that I think has been needed, particularly in this age of COVID. And we've all sort of tried to figure out, how do we navigate the world in this sort of new normal? And whether it be companies, non-for-profits, government organizations, and so on, it's really trying to figure out what is it that we really need. And empathy is one of those core ingredients that I feel we all need in our lives.
It's so interesting because everybody has a different perspective of empathy. And, for me, having hearing loss and deafness in my life, I have always looked at empathy as being something that is more of listening. How do I listen? And I spent my whole life trying so hard to listen. And it's a skill set you think it would be just good for someone who had hearing. But listening to someone's feelings, but really stepping into their shoes and understanding that hearing is one thing, but listening is even more powerful. It's the pillar of humility and humanity.
Yeah. And I sort of come at it from 2 points of view. One is, as a trained psychotherapist and as an executive coach, I sort of look at the idea of listening from the perspective of the employee dealing with the sort of travails and issues of everyday life in how does one manage their work life? And then from the opposite end of it, whether you're talking to corporate executives, CEOs, management, and otherwise, is thinking about this new work culture, this new idea of thinking, well, we're in this new place and we have to figure out, how do we deal with hybrid work? How do we deal with the idea of creating a corporate culture that is functional, that creates a competitive advantage? And being able to listen is such an important aspect. And also the idea of, well, being empathetic to the idea that there are many ways in which we communicate. And so we have to be, I'm not going to say proficient, but at least understanding, have a greater sense of understanding that we all need to learn how to communicate in multiple ways and be empathetic about that. And there are multiple ways to think about empathy. There's this sort of cognitive empathy, which is the ability to understand. There's this sort of emotional empathy, which is feeling someone and saying, well, when you think about emotional empathy, you say, I feel you. Or then there's empathetic action. And the empathetic action is sort of standing together, doing your part in the sort of empathetic exercise. These 3 pillars are so important in how we look at the future of work culture.
You hit it, and it is getting everybody to that cognitive place of thinking and that self-awareness and giving themselves permission to be vulnerable and to have that self-awareness. And I think a lot of leaders and individuals are so afraid of unveiling the onion and being themselves, and how powerful that self-exploration can be when your vulnerability comes out, and that everyone shares that commonality that we all want support in an organization. And how do we do that? Through the spirit of bringing out that empathy.
Right. And there is a saying, progress, not perfection. And I think it can't be underscored more. The fact of the matter is, we all have to make progress, and that we don't have to be perfect, that we can make mistakes, and actually making mistakes is a good thing. It's how we learn. And in this new sort of world of work, in this new cultural sort of zeitgeist that we're all going through, and we're all trying to figure it out, none of us really could say, okay, I can pinpoint the exact answer, because there are multiple answers. But being able to understand that we have to be able to progress in a way that we're finding new metrics of success is, I think, critically important in this time.
Yes, and metrics, I think a lot of us leaders are so keyed on those metrics. How do we have more productivity? How do we, profit? And not understanding that there's a very important element here, that the empathy piece will provide all of those things and create that domino effect organically.
Yeah. Yeah. And we sort of talk about the idea of saying, well, if we're going to look at this sort of empathetic piece, how do you disrupt the system? How do you think about disrupting the system? And you both, your work and my work has always been about the idea of disruption, but there's another D that goes along with it, and that's the disability piece. And oftentimes the disability piece has always been seen purely in the realm of diversity and inclusion, which it is, but I think that there's another element here, and that's the lived experience and understanding that there is a wealth, I mean, truly a wealth of knowledge in understanding how we apply that narrative in different ways and how that becomes a true disruptive force. And bringing our experiences together, I think, allows for organizations to say, we can mine this and we can apply it in different ways.
It's also, a new problem solving, of innovation, and understanding that, the innovation and discipline go hand in hand with each other. And that, not being afraid of making that change and not worrying about what everybody thinks. It's doing what comes from your chakra, your heart, and producing that disruption is new perspective, new problem solving, new solutions, and getting people to think in probably ways that they've never even imagined. And people with disabilities, as we both know in our work, are nature's greatest problem solvers.
Right. And out of sort of purpose comes profit, but also the idea of innovation. When we talk about disability, by definition, the world was never made for us. So it's how do we have to rethink, recalibrate, and innovate constantly. And that becomes a foundation for organizations to say, well, maybe we really have to look at this narrative and that we have to apply it to our own business model. And how do we rethink that? But in order to get there, there has to be a bridge. And that bridge is understanding the idea of empathy and being able to use those pillars to say, how do we think about this in a new way? And how do we become disruptive? And ultimately, how does that disruption provide a competitive advantage?
It's interesting, through the work that I have been doing lately, seeing through the transformations of leaders, is watching them unveil their truth and becoming more vulnerable to disrupt. And say, you know what, now I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable by doing the exercises of immersion and feeling and understanding and listening, and now saying, I really hear you, but I am listening. And getting the pulse of the human heart to understand the value of people as people, not only as people with disabilities, but looking at each person, each employee, each leader, each customer, that they are of value.
Right. Right. And I think we bring our whole selves to work. There often was a time when, prior to sort of COVID, and it was this idea of, okay, we sort of put on this mask, we put on our work mask and we go to work, and it's a separate environment from our home life and who we are, our whole selves. But now that has changed. The fact that work is decentralized, the fact that we live at home, we work at home, it's become our place to play, it's become our place to our entertainment, it's become our restaurant, and it's also become our workspace. That has conflated sort of how we look at ourselves in the context of work. I never say to organizational leaders, well, you have to become a psychotherapist. No, you have to have greater emotional intelligence. And that, I think, is really, you and I certainly can provide that for organizations to understand, okay, what is that roadmap to greater emotional intelligence? What is that roadmap to greater empathy? And why is that important? You're not supposed to be a psychotherapist. You're not supposed, but you are supposed to understand how emotional intelligence plays a role in your organizational culture.
Disruption is such a fascinating word. I think some people look at disruption as like a bad word. If I'm going to disrupt something, I'm going to mess things up.
Right.
And I think that if we reprogram ourselves by these new roadmaps, we will have a softer, kinder way of thinking, but a strategic way of thinking, a new strategy way of thinking. And, you know, I think people are so fixed on what was, and to your point, what is now, what is today? How do we be more productive in these newer environments, as you mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, and if you look at disruption as something that's new, I mean, in many ways, it's very similar to the human body. When the human body has a stroke, they have to find new neural pathways to function. And what you're trying to do is sort of create new models of behavior, new models of thinking, new ways of doing. And oftentimes organizations are, you know, it's the F word that is the great boundary, and that F word is fear. And I think one of the things that you and I sort of will work on with organizations together is to get people past that fear and understanding that you can use fear as a motivator. You can use it as a way to propel an organization to say, how do we use this to our advantage, not our disadvantage, and how disruption becomes a critical ingredient in our future success.
Challenge people. And I think that we all like to take on challenges. We like to prove ourselves. And I think this is kind of a different way of proving yourself. And we take people in these situations through the work we do to challenge them to think differently, to act differently, to strategize differently. And they thank us for that. But their customers, their staff, the employees are thanking them because now they've elevated to a level that they never even imagined they would be at.
Right. And what you're also doing is, by thinking differently and being able to connect, is you're able to and that form of connection is so important. What you're doing is you're not only thinking about it from a top-down approach, but you're creating an alliance between, you know, the C-suite, managers, and other sort of corporate leaders on down through it. Really, it sort of trickles down through an organizational structure. And in that way, what you're also doing is you're finding common ground. That commonality is so important because it humanizes. And I think people are also fearful in this new age of, you know, artificial intelligence, this new idea of decentralized workforce. This in itself has become disruption, but it's all how you take that disruption and utilize it as a tool. And what our goal hopefully is to create a better understanding of those tools so that people can manifest it in a very positive way.
Human connection is top of mind today, being that we've been so removed and remote in the world we've been living in. And how do we bring out the best in human connection? And human connection, for me, has always been, how do we have that conversation? And conversations are so critical and so important in these organizations to allow us to bring out the best in emotional intelligence, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's how we talk to each other, not at each other. And oftentimes we're so consumed with trying to get our point across that we're not actually talking to one another, that we're not communicating. And you sort of bring up the point of listening. And I always think of that there is an art to listening.
Yeah.
And one has to sort of discover that. And it's important and it's valuable. And I think that being able to our work together allows organizations to understand a lot of those pieces and how they connect together and create value.
Value, we both know there's so many different forms of value, right?
Mhm.
There's the emotional value, there's the physical value, and then there's the dollar value.
Right.
And we are able to bring all three of those elements together to organizations so they can have the best of all of those values. And I think a lot of organizations have learned that they need to take those steps, and that it's not, a way to just drive to the top without having the feelings of all those different layers in an organization.
Yeah, and I think in a time period where diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility, and ESG, environment, social governance, has become top of mind. I mean, you're looking at business schools, some of the highest end business schools that are now focusing their curriculum on ESG, on diversity and inclusion. So future leaders are coming out with that sort of skill set. But also companies are realizing, wait a minute, this is a value add. But we also have to understand, what are the ingredients involved here? How do we bake the cake? And I think that really what we can help do is provide that guidance and being chefs in the kitchen, so to speak, to help sort of cook that and prepare the meals, so that when you go out to your customer base, when you go out to even internally in the organization, you have something, that a meal, or that is ready made and prepared for the consumer, whoever consumes that.
We've grown up always worrying about the end user.
Mhm.
We always worried about the customer, which is really important. But we're learning that the employees and the environment that we build are just as important to have the end user be happy and satisfied and feel a sense of belonging, not only sense of belonging in companies, but a sense of belonging on the outside too.
Right. If you don't have the infrastructure, if you don't have the foundation, you really, I mean, then it becomes a house of cards and it just falls down. You need to have that foundation. And now more than ever, you need the ingredients of emotional intelligence. You need the ingredients of empathy. You need the ingredients of listening. You need all of those to create that stable foundation for growth.
Empathy is so amazing, because when you look at empathy, when people are curious, they become more empathetic naturally. And the curiosity builds great ideas. And we've seen through the work we do how incredible the imagination can be once there is that curiosity built in an organization.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I think look, Einstein said it best: imagination is knowledge turned to dust. And so when you sort of think about the value of imagination, and when you look at the work we've done, obviously in the disability space specifically, um, that has always needed this idea of a fertile ground where imagination becomes so much a part of how we think. And that sort of tool is so needed in 21st century corporate life, and just not only in terms of just the day-to-day infrastructure of management, but what people need and what people want. People are consuming information and consuming things in different ways and want different things. And so imagination becomes such a fertile part of the work that we do, and has always been a fertile part of the work that we do. It just so happens that now people are understanding, wait a minute, this isn't just about the people up in Silicon Valley that have the, I guess, the notion of imagination, or people in Hollywood, but it is the fact that imagination is pervasive. And we need to understand that, how do we use it? But empathy is so important as a sort of gateway into mining that value of imagination.
Imagination, is obviously creativity, but through voices being heard and people having the opportunity, which is something that a lot of people in the disability community have felt that they have been, silent in their own way, has hurt the community. But through the sound of silence, we've also been able to create environment, bringing the best of our imagination to cultures and community.
Right. And it's also having that awareness and that level of empathy to recognize that, one, we need this culture of psychological safety, and being able to feel safe and at home and comfortable, and that there won't be any feeling of sort of rather an adverse reaction, but that just because you are dealing with disabilities in a variety of ways, and we were talking about a variety of ways, it doesn't have to be just something that's observable, but non-apparent disabilities, which run the gamut. Actually, about 70% of people who have a disability is non-apparent. I mean, but that's important to understand. So when you're thinking about strategically, from whether it be an HR perspective, whether it be a talent management perspective or otherwise, it's how do we be creative, but also how do we fundamentally create a psychologically safe environment? And what does that take? It comes back to empathy. This is a circle, and it continues to sort of come back to the same themes over and over again. But is a company ready? And do they have enough sort of strategic ideas in terms of their robust concepts to take this into action? And that's something that remains to be seen for anybody.
I think with the combined talents of what we bring collectively is giving companies that permission, but understanding that empathy is the new language of leadership. That this is the new future of consumerism, and that we are more human than we realize and think we are.
Yeah, and that we need to understand constantly, who are we building an organization for? Yes, there are elements of numbers, there are elements of the sort of technological revolution, but it's also being aggressive in terms of dealing with sort of real emotional issues that are compounding and actually can be solved. And that's what we're here to do. I mean, ultimately is to help organizations and individuals solve problems.
That's why we are nature's best problem solvers.
Yeah, that's what I hear.